This is a biscuit handle, and I've been working on this little thing for the past couple of years. You may even have seen a few of my previous iterations of this idea posted here on my channel, and I've made even more prototypes off camera. I have made dozens of iterations of this little biscuit handle idea, most of which did not work at all, but I'm finally at the point where I feel like I have an actual usable product, and I think it's a really good idea. I think it could be very useful to a lot of other woodworkers, so I thought I'd share. So this right here is the most recent iteration of the biscuit handle, and this video is just gonna be kind of an info dump of all the work that I've done for the past few years to get it to this point. So first I'm gonna show you what exactly this biscuit handle is or does, and then I'm gonna go over all the problems that I ran into making this that caused this project to take so long. So this biscuit handle is really just a normal drawer or cabinet handle that instead of installing with a drill and screws is installed with a biscuit joiner. And there's a couple of reasons why you might want to use a biscuit handle rather than a normal handle. The first reason being that normal handles are pretty time consuming to install. First, I need to measure out and mark the center point of my drawer front. Then I need to measure the distance between the two screw holes on my drawer handle that I'm going to install. And then I need to divide that in half and add that half measurement to either side of the center mark I made. And then I have to measure and mark the height of those two screw hole points to make sure that they're level with each other. So that's 6 measurements and 5 marks needed to install just one drawer handle. And I still need to drill my holes and screw in both sides of the drawer handle. And with all those measurements and steps involved, the process can get pretty long, especially if you're installing multiple drawer handles, which you usually are. Also, kind of the bigger problem for me is that I'm always listening to music or podcasts when I'm working in the shop. And because of that, I'm not always paying the best attention to what I'm doing. So when there's several steps or several measurements involved in a process like this, and I'm kind of just going through the motions, it's really easy for me to forget a measurement or forget a step and then screw up the whole thing. So the less steps, the harder it is for me to screw something up. So the benefit of the biscuit handle is that it can be installed with just 1 measurement instead of 5. All you gotta do is set your biscuit joiner to whatever height you want the handle to be installed at. Then you're gonna measure out and mark the center point of your drawer face, and you don't need any other measurements, just a single mark in the middle of your drawer front. Then you're gonna line up the biscuit joiner with that mark you made and cut a slot. And now you can just glue in your drawer handle. And this is really ideal when you're working on several drawers because you only have to set the height of your biscuit joiner once. Once it's set to the correct height, all you gotta do is mark the center of each of your drawers, and now you can quickly cut all your slots at once and install all your handles. Also, another big benefit of installing drawer handles with a biscuit joiner rather than a drill is that you don't have to worry about installing the handle crooked. Because it's a biscuit joiner, it is always gonna cut that slot perfectly parallel to the top of the drawer face. Whereas if you were installing this with a drill, you'd have to make sure that those two holes that you drilled were perfectly level with each other. So that's the first big reason that I like these biscuit handles, is that they're just a lot easier to install. And the other big reason that I like these handles is that I just think they look really cool. I just think these drawer handles look a lot higher end. And what I mean by that is that in high-end furniture, or really fine woodworking in general, there tends to be kind of an emphasis on the use of joinery rather than any type of mechanical fastener like screws or nails. Which means that those screw heads that are left behind from installing a normal drawer handle can become kind of an eyesore when they're seen in an all-jointed, really nice piece of furniture. They just look kind of out of place. And this is why you'll often see in a lot of high-end furniture that the makers of the furniture will spend a lot of time to actually make the handles themselves and joint them into place rather than buying a handle that they can screw in. Now, I want to make it clear that I definitely do not think of my work as fine woodworking. Far from it, I barely ever cut any joinery, but I would like to trick people into thinking my work is better than it is, and I think that these handles help with that. I get the look of a high-end jointed handle without actually spending any of the extra time. All right, so hopefully all that made sense and you kind of understand the point of these, because for how simple they look, it actually took a great deal of effort and a lot of failure to get it to this point. I've made many, many different iterations of this idea, trying to make it better each time, and I don't really have time to go through every different version that I made along the way, but I would like to compare my most recent biscuit handle to one of the first attempts that I made, just to show you all the major changes that I've made along the way. So this is what one of my first attempts at this biscuit handle idea looked like, and I posted this as a YouTube short a few years ago. And here is the most current biscuit handle design, and you'll notice quite a few differences. First off, this new handle is much stronger than any of my previous attempts. Some of the first biscuit handles I made in that YouTube short were very thin, and the grain direction was running perpendicular to the pushing and pulling force. And I did not realize that this was going to be a problem at the time, but as many people in the comments of that YouTube short pointed out, this makes for a pretty weak handle. These new handles though have a lot more material to them. I also changed the grain direction when making them, so they're a lot harder to break even with constant use. You'll also notice on this newer handle that there's this little ridge here, which I did not realize was going to be so necessary on my first attempts. Because a biscuit joiner cuts a round slot, the biscuit handle can easily slide and rotate around in that slot, making it crooked. So this ridge ensures that the handle is installed in the right position and keeps it from rotating. The first biscuit handles also had the problem of glue squeeze out, which is very time consuming and difficult to clean up, which defeats the whole purpose of the biscuit handle, which is to be installed quickly. To fix this problem, this little channel was added to the design to collect any excess glue that could have squeezed out. Past biscuit handle prototypes also did not always fit the best, and this is because some biscuit joiners have blades with angled teeth. And those blades with angled teeth would leave behind sort of a V profile instead of a totally flat joint. This prevented the biscuit handle from completely filling the slot, so it would leave behind a small gap. And it's a little hard to see that gap on camera, but you can see I can fit my fingernail along that gap. So to solve that problem, I added a small chamfer to the jointed edge of the biscuit handle. And I actually stole this solution from what I've seen trim carpenters on YouTube do. If you've ever seen a video of a carpenter trying to fit a piece of wood around a rough surface like brick or rock, when they're coping that edge, they will cut it at sort of an angle so the edge is sharp. And this allows for a much tighter fit because that edge is so thin it can kind of mar down or sort of cut into whatever surface it's being jointed to. Using that same idea to add a beveled edge to the biscuit handle means no gaps, even if the slot you cut is less than perfect. And the last big improvement that I'm going to talk about today that I've made with this newest version of the biscuit handle is that they're just a lot easier for me to make now. The first biscuit handles I made were handmade, which is great, but it's also very time consuming and it's not the most accurate. I've made all my prototypes since then on my CNC, which allows me to be a lot more precise and make sure that these handles actually fit well. And I've been tweaking the process of making these with every iteration to find the fastest and easiest way to do this. I inset a drill press clamp into my CNC, which makes holding the handle workpieces a lot easier and quicker, and it also ensures that the workpiece is always placed in the same spot, so I can cut one handle after another without having to zero out my CNC every time. I also have the whole process combined into one file, and I only use one bit for the entire cut, so I don't need to do any tool changes, which means I can carve out the entire handle in one go in under 30 minutes, so it's very little work, or at least physical work for me. The only work I really have to do after the carve is just cut the handle free from the workpiece, and then I also round over the top edge of each handle just because the CNC can't get to that part of the handle because of the orientation that it's carved in. So I think these could be pretty useful to a lot of other woodworkers and makers, so I'm going to start trying to sell some of them on my Etsy. So if you want to check that out, the link to that will be in the description. Or if you don't want to spend any money, you can very easily make a simplified version of a biscuit handle just with a 4 1/8 inch hole saw bit. That's what I used to make the first versions of the biscuit handle, along with a few other tools, but really the only one you need is that hole saw bit. The blade of a biscuit joiner is 4 inches in diameter, so that 4 1/8 inch hole saw bit, after the kerf of the hole saw blade is removed, will cut a pretty close to 4-inch arc, which will fit pretty well into a biscuit joiner slot. One more quick thought I just wanted to add: if you do end up buying one of these handles from me, the jointed part of the handle, the part that actually fits into the slot, is exactly 1/2 inch deep, which is the same depth that a number 20 biscuit joiner slot should be. However, one thing I've noticed when using different biscuit joiners is that sometimes the biscuit joiner is not perfectly set to a 1/2 inch. So you'll probably want to do a few test cuts and adjustments before actually plunging and cutting into your drawer face. And if you don't already know, there's a small adjusting bolt on the side of your biscuit joiner that you can mess with to adjust the cutting depth. Once you have that depth dialed in, you shouldn't really have to mess with that ever again. Anyways, I hope people like this biscuit handle idea as much as I do. Really what I'd like to do, if there's enough interest, is expand this idea to have a bunch of different handle designs that work with a biscuit joiner. But as of right now, this is the only design that I will have for sale. Again, link to my Etsy in the description if you're interested in that. Otherwise, if you have any ideas on how to improve this idea, please let me know.